prisoner is there," replied Vampa, pointing to the hollow space in front of which the bandit was on guard. "And I will go myself and tell him he is free." The chief went towards the place he had pointed out as Albert's prison, and Franz and the Count followed him. "What is the prisoner doing?" inquired Vampa of the sentinel. "Ma foi, captain," replied the sentry. "I do not know. For the last hour I have not heard him stir." "Come in, your excellency," said Vampa. The Count and Franz ascended 7 or 8 steps after the chief, who drew back a bolt and opened a door. Then, by the gleam of a lamp, similar to that which lighted the columbarium, Albert was to be seen wrapped up in a cloak, which one of the bandits had lent him, lying in a corner, in profound slumber. "Come," said the Count, smiling with his own peculiar smile. "Not so bad for a man who is to be shot at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning." Vampa looked at Albert with a kind of admiration. He was not insensible to such a proof of courage. "You are right, your excellency," he said. "This must be one of your friends." Then, going to Albert, he touched him on the shoulder, saying, "Will your excellency please to awaken?" Albert stretched out his arms, rubbed his eyelids, and opened his eyes. "Oh," said he, "is it you, captain? You should have allowed me to sleep. I had such a delightful dream. I was dancing the galop at Torlonia's with the Countess G." Then he drew his watch from his pocket, that he might see how time sped. "1:30 only," said he. "Why the devil did you rouse me at this hour?" "To tell you that you are free, your excellency." "My dear fellow," replied Albert with perfect ease of mind, "remember, for the future, Napoleon's maxim, never awaken me but for bad news. If you had let me sleep on, I should have finished my gallop, and have been grateful to you all my life. So then, they have paid my ransom." Okay, back to finding Albert to be a little bit obnoxious. My dude, do you know what you're putting other folks through? Do you know what you're putting Franz through? Also, you seem pretty nonplussed for having been fooled by these men for what you seemed so invested in with your little romantic dalliance earlier in the day and week. Suddenly all is forgiven? That line, Albert stretched out his arms, rubbed his eyelids, and opened his eyes, like a little fresh-born baby, waking with the beams of the sunrise. I don't know, man. Dante, maybe, just maybe, you've misjudged Mercedes. If she can raise such a doofus as this, maybe you dodged a bullet. Also, I don't know. I mean, okay, I shouldn't put that on Mercedes, but like, Albert being the son of Fernand and Mercedes, like, how do we think Fernand? Do you remember Fernand? Remember that guy from a million years ago? He was cowardly. Well, I guess that holds water. But he was prideful, and he was, I would assume, the type of guy that if he's going to go into the army and then make a ton of money, like, he's going to have that sort of superficial masculinity. That paper tiger sort of mentality. He was so sullen and so wishy-washy early on. What would sudden success in the army and then a windfall of money do to a personality like that? And I'm asking that in terms of, like, what environment did Albert grow up in? Now, I have to also check modern sensibilities at the door, because obviously it's not like a nuclear family household. You're brought up in society, not necessarily in a household. You know, you've got handmaids and servants and all kinds of people helping to raise your children, and you are in a cloistered environment. So, okay, even still, it begs the question of how would Fernand feel about his own son, and same with Mercedes. It just seems like such a doofus. Why am I being so critical of Albert? He just got his life saved. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. Maybe this is his way of trying to put forth a brave face. Like, you might have captured me and imprisoned me, but I'm not going to let you see it affect me. Maybe I need to give him more of a benefit of the doubt. But Dumas even says, "My dear fellow," replied Albert with perfect ease of mind, "remember for the future Napoleon's maxim, ... I think Dumas wants us to see that Albert is nonplussed by all of this. Let's turn our attention to the Dumas biography once again, shall we? This comes from the same chapter. In fact, there's 2 bits I'm going to pull out here, 2 earmarks. Same chapter called Mother and Son, about Dumas' upbringing. And this isn't anything like a factoid or anything, but I earmarked this just because I found it to be kind of interesting in the development of a person, when and where they were born and what they lived through, in their life that's informing their worldview. This was going on to say that, Dumas was a child at a time when cataclysmic events were happening in France, particularly, the fall of the First Empire, a bunch of different battles under the, reign of Napoleon, the failed Russian campaign of 1812, Napoleon being forced out of Europe, and eventually being ousted altogether as all of the allies around France started moving in on them. And Dumas was born in a place where all of the invader armies are coming through. So he, from a very young age, is exposed to a lot of turmoil, constant false alarms, horsemen, signaling going through the town from one point to another, seeing a murder of a bystander in his town from a young age, and of course all of that concluding with the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy, which we talked about ad nauseum in our first year. So you can imagine, for a boy of his age, having witnessed all of these historical events, and being literally in the path, on the ground, in the midst of all of it, and seeing the leader of France, Napoleon, being exiled, and being the son of General Dumas, a high-ranking general in Napoleon's army, puts a young boy in a very strange place. And I bring this up in terms of the stories that Dumas chooses to write. I heard something recently, I'm sure it was on another podcast, so it's not a thought of mine, and I can't cite the reference specifically, but this idea that in the year 2026, when I'm recording this, what I call dad traps are becoming a thing of the past. Books for dads to read. And, I'm obviously putting all of that in big air quotes. Anybody can read historical fiction, historical nonfiction, military history, all of that stuff. Anyone can read anything, obviously. But there's less and less of it being produced. It's becoming less and less popular as some of the big hitters in those genres start to die off. And I'm wondering if it's because, for the most part, and it's, I guess, specific to America, a lot of people, for a couple generations now, haven't lived through, World War II. They haven't lived through the Depression. We have 9/11, obviously. We have the housing crisis in 2008, but they're very abstract. The 9/11 is a one-time hit on America, and then we look outward, to protect ourselves and protect our neighbors, quote unquote and quote unquote. It's not the ongoing cataclysm, to use the word they use in this book. And so if you don't live through that, and that's not impressing upon your reality as you're an impressionable youth, is that going to be the thing that creates passion in you to write about later on? It just makes me wonder if that is why Dumas has chosen a career of writing particularly historical fiction. Okay, that's all I've got for today. Join me here tomorrow for the penultimate episode of Chapter 37. Until tomorrow, okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.